What do you think, boss? A bit old, isn't it? It's the best we could find without leaving the march. Not like anyone'll have any better, yeah? A sour expression crossed Olin's face as the river barge drifted towards its moorings on the waterfront of Bloomrush Growing Pleasure Quarter. The vessel was a recreational craft built by one of the local counts, but it had clearly seen better days. At some point in the past, the former owner had been wealthy enough to crew and maintain the vessel, which was built wider than the average river barge to accommodate its passengers in relative luxury. After 2 or 3 generations of neglect, however, the once gaudy vessel was littered with rotting furniture and its disintegrating curtains had faded to a dusty grey. Is there anything wrong with the ship itself? Olin asked, as in, will it sink once we start using it to entertain guests? Won't have to worry about that, at least, the harbourmaster answered. Stupid Count was dumb enough to keep the hull maintained even when he couldn't afford the rest. Olin let out a derisive snort. It was a common enough story. Nobles had more pride than sense and often clung to their heirlooms and traditions even as everything else fell apart around them. Get this thing cleaned up, Olin said. I want it refurbished and crewed by the end of the month. All of those well-padded nobles overwintering in the capital will be back come planting season. Where should we get the stuff from, boss? Grab the best pieces being made for the new palace, Olin gestured vaguely in the direction of the pleasure quarters core. As for people, we've got an endless supply of them squatting all over the common districts. That wasn't strictly true, but it was close enough that it didn't matter. In the time since House Bloomrush initiated its reorganization of the city, tens of thousands of people had succumbed to exposure and starvation. With the local temples being overwhelmed by the needy, the spread of disease had grown to epidemic proportions. Yet, for every citizen who died, more arrived to replace them, refugees fleeing in the face of the famine ravaging the north. Of course, the plight of the cityfolk mattered little to House Bloomrush. No, it was more accurate to say that it was welcomed. Discontent and desperation were only threats when the masses had the means to do something about it. As things were, violent revolt would earn them nothing but death. The city only contained a day or 2 of provisions at best, and every supply line and depot was well guarded by a mix of armed retinues and mercenary forces. All the people could do was prioritize their individual survival by submitting to the will of those who controlled the flow of food and other supplies coming into the city. Death was no obstacle, rather than that, it was considered a convenient culling of the excess, unwanted population. The situation was a boon for Olin, as well. With the special privileges he had won from House Bloomrush, his development of the new pleasure quarter was proceeding rapidly. By calling in the debts owed to the 8 Fingers by many of the nobles in the area, he was able to obtain everything that he needed without needing to make the same massive expenditures in security. After settling a few small details with the pleasure quarter's harbourmaster, Olin stepped back onto a high-seated carriage that had been obtained in a similar manner to the moored barge. Where to, boss? The driver asked. Let's do a circuit of the quarter, Olin answered. I want to see how things are going today. He leaned back into his cushioned seat as the carriage got underway, the dozen hand-picked warriors of his escort falling into step around it much like a noble's footman. The incessant winter rain had diminished to a drizzle, giving him a good chance to scrutinize the week's progress. Early in the development of the quarter, clusters of tents forming makeshift gambling dens and brothels lay on the fringes of the construction work. They were still present, but were rapidly being overshadowed by proper buildings housing establishments of the same nature. Olin considered getting rid of the former, but Marla kept going on about creating a hierarchy for the quarter to help with business. He wasn't sure about the hierarchy part, but allowing the tents to remain certainly helped to relieve the region's burgeoning population of armsmen and mercenaries of their coin. It was a scenario that the other 8 Fingers directors, who struggled to even open underground casinos, could only dream of. He wasn't sure if they were aware of what he was doing yet, but he would be firmly entrenched in his new base of power long before they could muster a significant response. And if I play things right, the Sorcerer's Kingdom will back me and not them. The pure evil of his monstrous minions aside, The Sorcerer King's machinations in Re-Estize appeared to be rooted in understandable motives. Of most relevance to Olin was the fact that the Sorcerer's Kingdom expressed great interest in drawing wealth into its coffers. Indeed, Lady Albedo's first set of orders to the Eight Fingers revolved around economic activity, tapping into the syndicate's network of merchant contacts to secure resource contracts and import all manner of commodities in exchange for the Sorcerer's Kingdom's cheap and plentiful grain. The effort achieved a dubious degree of success due to the Kingdom of Darkness' evil reputation, and the lack of meaningful results left the directors responsible beside themselves with dread. Logically speaking, however, he could use a portion of the pleasure quarter's profits to offer the same thing. It was fundamentally no different from currying favor with anyone in power, and Olin was well accustomed to playing games of that nature. After years of thankless work in the procurement division, he would finally get his due. A frown crossed his lips as the carriage slowed to a halt. He leaned in his seat to see if something was blocking their way, and then a knock sounded on the door. Olin scowled at the armed escort awaiting him on the street as he unlatched the window. "What is it?" Olin asked. "A broker's come to see you," the escort said. "Said something about the Marquis sending someone from the capital." "Could you be any less vague?" Olin growled, "Where is he?" In response, the armored man gestured to a nondescript fellow standing just outside Olin's ring of escorts. The information broker's face was familiar, but his name wasn't worth remembering. Olin scanned his surroundings before impatiently beckoning for the man to come forward. "What do you have for me, old man?" The broker licked his lips nervously before eyeing the inside of Olin's carriage. Olin let out a sigh before shifting in his seat to open the door. "This had better be worth it," he said. "Yes, sir," the broker bobbed his hooded head as he stepped inside. "Thank you kindly, sir. Old Skip's got a big bit of news." "Drop the act," Olin snapped. Old Skip reacted with a nervous grin that tempted Olin to knock out what few teeth he had left. The old man fidgeted in his seat, nearly reaching the limit of Olin's patience before speaking again. A coach showed up at the west gate. 2 knights came with it. One of Bloomrush's sons was inside. "From the capital? Which son was it?" "Yes, sir. From the capital. Son of the second mistress, I think. Anyway, they came in all urgent, so old Skip got curious. Turns out they're checking some kind of old seal." "A seal?" Olin furrowed his brow. "How do you know that? What did it look like?" "Old Skip has his ways," the broker said as he failed to put on an aura of mystique. Didn't get to see the thing, but some of the footmen were chatty enough. Important things what the seal came on. Looks like there's been some trouble with the Sorcerer's Kingdom." The old broker looked this way and that, as if the mere mention of Re-Estize's new neighbor might summon a skeleton from under their seats. "And what is the nature of this trouble, precisely?" Olin asked. "Don't know," old Skip answered. "Coach entered the nobles' quarter before they yapped about that part, but every one of them looked none too happy." Olin fished a few silver coins out of his purse to rid himself of the broker and opened the carriage's windows to air out the stench that the man left behind. The people who came with the group from the capital weren't important, but what they carried with them was. What was the trouble? The fact that a seal was involved implied some sort of official document. As for when the trouble happened, it took about a week and a half for a coach to arrive from the capital in the best of weather. With winter being what it was, 2 weeks was probably the best one could hope for. "What do we do now, boss?" one of his escorts asked through the open window. "Let's head back to the office," Olin answered. While any event involving the Sorcerer's Kingdom merited his attention, he felt a distinct lack of urgency based on what he had learned so far. If Re-Estize had done something particularly egregious, Olin didn't doubt that the entire country would have been butchered before Bloomrush's envoy could arrive on their errand. Another one of those incompetent heirs probably did something stupid again. But what about the seal? The document they're bearing could damn well be anything. If he was going to talk with House Bloomrush about what was going on, it would be best to find out what he could about the new arrivals, The Eight Fingers didn't have anyone working on the inside. Those who had all followed the Marquis to the capital, but House Bloomrush had no shortage of subordinates susceptible to bribes. The carriage continued on its way for barely a minute before it stopped again. Once again, Olin frowned as he inspected his surroundings. The pleasure quarter wasn't very large, but the carriage still had a ways to go before arriving at the office. "It's one of our boys, boss. A guy from House Beaumont came looking for you." An exasperated sigh escaped Olin's lips. Why did everything have to happen all at once? "What did he want?" Olin asked. "I'm not getting involved in that brat's political games, if that's what it is." "He said the Countess is entertaining an important guest. She wants to see you before she leaves." "And who is this important guest?" "That's, Olin's annoyance grew as the man hesitated to reply. He poked his head out of the window, searching for the messenger. Anxiety supplanted his ire as the man silently mouthed the origin of Countess Beaumont's guest. "The Sorceress Kingdom? Why here? Why now? Why me?" Considering the arrival of Bloomrush's envoy, was the trouble hinted at by the broker centered on this territory? In any case, it wasn't wise to make the visitor from the Sorceress Kingdom wait for too long. "Let them know I'll be there shortly," Olin said. "Did they mention anything other than that?" The messenger shook his head. Olin waved him away and retreated to the interior of his carriage, his mind clouded by formless worries. It was impossible to think that the visitor had simply dropped by as a courtesy, but he couldn't think of any specific reason as to why he had been called upon. With nothing to prepare against, all he could do was appear as useful as possible. Upon arriving at the syndicate's new main office, which was a part of the Pleasure Quarter's central complex, he set about doing just that. "Find some men in good with House Bloomrush," Olin said as he stepped out of his carriage. "Ones who can freely get in and out of the upper city. Have them report to me upstairs." He went through an all-too-short mental checklist as he climbed the stairs to the third floor of the building. In truth, there was little he could do to impress the Sorceress Kingdom on such short notice beyond maintaining the image of competence and offering what small amount of tribute could be afforded from the Pleasure Quarter's profits so far. Hopefully, it would be enough to keep him out of harm's way in the event that the visitor had come to air some grievance. "Marla," Olin said as he turned the latch on the office door, "has this week's." Olin released his hold on the door and stepped back into the corridor with a curse. The guard posted outside the room rushed forward to inspect the woman lying on the floor. "She's dead," the man said, "but the body's still warm. I don't get it. I was here the whole time, the door never even opened." "Scour the area," Olin shouted, "lock up anyone suspicious." What counts as suspicious, boss?" The man standing over Marla's body gingerly rolled the corpse over with the toe of his boot, but Olin already knew what they would find. While Marla might have been the most prominent member of the local syndicate hierarchy to meet such a fate, she wasn't the first. There were no visible wounds on her body or any signs of being poisoned. The room showed no evidence of a violent struggle. "The same as last time," Olin replied. "This has to be the work of a magic caster." What if it's the curse? Curses are cast by magic casters, you nitwit. Now move. Heavy footfalls sounded over the wooden floor as the men around him scattered to carry out his orders. In all honesty, he couldn't hope for much. A magic caster didn't require any specific weapons or armor to do their dirty work, meaning that they could appear as anyone. Since they were obviously dealing with a professional, it was even possible that they could appear as someone other than themselves. "What should we do with the body?" the guard in the room asked. "Toss it in the sewer," Olin answered. "The slimes will take care of it in no time." Not that anyone would care about another dead body with the city as it was. Well, that wasn't precisely true, as the temples couldn't keep up with disposal in their overburdened state. That, however, only meant that it wasn't uncommon to see corpses piled in alleys or dumped into the ditches outside the city wall. Once Marla's body was dragged out of the office, Olin carefully made his way in. He wasn't an expert on magic, But his time in the Eight Fingers had taught him a few things. Spells that targeted individuals, attack spells, in particular, required a clear line of sight between the caster and their target. As such, he stayed well out of the way of the window that was probably the way through which Marla had been killed. There was no sign that anyone had physically entered through that window, so he could reasonably assume that no nasty surprises had been planted for other people using the office. Still, he had no desire to linger. He crept his way over to the back of the room, where a handful of safes were slotted into their stone mountings. After disarming the traps protecting the largest one, he withdrew several bags of gold coins and transferred their contents into a lacquered wooden casket. It was a respectable sum that could purchase a sizable shipment of the iron ore that the Sorcerer's Kingdom so often exported from the mines in the area. "You called for us, boss?" Olin snapped the lid of the casket shut, turning around to find a handful of men standing outside the door frame. Each was dressed as an individual one would expect to have frequent personal dealings with the nobility. A sense of morbid curiosity compelled him to wave the men in. Much to his disappointment, however, none of them keeled over dead when they crossed the open window. An envoy representing Marquis Bloomrush arrived from the capital today, he told them. "I want to know what they're doing here and all of the plans that are set in motion surrounding whatever it is they're here for." More than one of the men allowed their confusion to show upon hearing his words. When it became evident that nothing more would be forthcoming, however, they all silently filtered out of the room. "Why am I always surrounded by incompetents?" He already knew the answer to that. Any promising individuals who appeared were swiftly poached and transferred to other divisions to work in the more lucrative parts of the kingdom. That, too, was something he would change now that he was in control. After dressing in attire appropriate for visiting with nobles in the upper city, Olin returned to his carriage. He paid little attention to the vehicle's progress as he mentally prepared an overview of his activities should he be called upon to present one. Too quickly for his liking, the carriage rolled into the gate of Countess Beaumont's manor. He took an inventory of the manor grounds as he was guided inside by one of Reed's men. There were no additional vehicles aside from his and Countess Beaumont's carriage, and there was no sign of any foreign entourage. Whoever had come from the Sorcerer's Kingdom had likely arrived unnoticed by the city. That still didn't give any hints as to who the visitor was, however, as the Sorcerer King's minions used various means of travel and there seemed to be no preferences between them. His guide stopped at the entrance of the manor's drawing room and bid him to wait in the corridor while he went in to announce his arrival. The man appeared a moment later and gestured for Olin to enter. Olin took 3 steps forward before freezing in the doorframe. Shit. Shit, 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 shit. Olin's knuckles turned white as he gripped the casket cradled in his hands. Lounging on a long couch in the center of the room was the Sorcerer's Kingdom's demonic Prime Minister, Albedo. Sitting across a table set with afternoon tea was Countess Beaumont, with Liam standing behind her shoulder. He didn't know how long it took for him to shake off his paralysis, but no one said a word since his entrance. The only sound that punctuated the silence was the occasional rustle of paper as Albedo scrutinized the pile of pages in her gloved hand. Not knowing what to do with himself and not stupid enough to ask, Olin lingered near the door for a minute before mustering the courage to step closer. Flip. 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 Albedo paid his presence no mind, though Olin was sure she would lash out at him if he tried to figure out what she was reading. Was it information gathered about the city and its circumstances? Or was it simply the Countess' household accounts? He couldn't imagine a demon taking any interest in the latter. Tisk. Olin flinched as if he had been struck by a whip. "Just what in the world has Yuri been teaching you?" Albedo muttered. "Who is that?" Neither Countess Beaumont nor Liam reacted to Albedo's words, but Olin doubted the up-until-recently confined young noblewoman was their target. Did that mean Albedo was reading a report from Liam? Perhaps this Yuri was the kid's handler. Albedo leaned forward to place the papers on the table between them. Olin wouldn't have been a man if his gaze hadn't been drawn to the womanly curves that strained against the fabric of her pale dress as she did so. Is this everything you have to report? Albedo asked as she leaned back in her seat and crossed her legs. It's what I could gather considering the scope of my assignment, Your Excellency, Liam answered. Well, assignments. Aside from the problems related to this year's famine, things have been pretty plain. If I may, Lady Albedo. The world-class beauty's amber gaze turned up to regard Olin. Rather than the coquettish glance that men would desire from such a woman, however, the look she bestowed upon him was akin to how one might regard fresh horse manure on the street. Olin swallowed and forced himself to continue speaking. An envoy from House Bloomrush arrived from the capital today bearing a document related to the Sorceress Kingdom. My intelligence network is already positioning itself to observe how the major players in the city react to it. This is the first I've heard of it, Countess Beaumont said. What document might this be? Olin hid his disdain for the young upstart. Whether it was her trying to lead her clique of inexperienced nobles or obsessing over Liam, she had bitten off far more than she could chew and didn't know when to stop. He sent a meaningful look at Albedo, as if deferring the answer to a potentially confidential matter to her. Nothing overly noteworthy, Albedo replied with a bored look. The document simply expresses our intent to prosecute a war against Riestais. Countess Beaumont's jaw dropped open. Olin's nearly did the same. The Sorceress Kingdom was going to be at war with Riestais again? It went against all of the subversive moves that Albedo had instructed the Eight Fingers and their associates to undertake so far. What was the point of all of his hard work if everything was going to be destroyed? Your Excellency, Countess Beaumont said, may we know what grievance is being addressed in the coming war? One of our caravans bearing humanitarian aid for the Holy Kingdom was robbed, Albedo replied. The Countess breathed a sigh of relief. I see, she said. What sort of reparations will you exact from the kingdom? Do you believe a full levy will be raised to contest them? Reparations? The demon arched an eyebrow. Why, the only reparation we will accept is the complete and utter destruction of Riestais. This idiot girl. Why anyone would expect anything less from a war involving a country ruled by the undead and demons was beyond him. Riestais was merely lucky the first time around because the Sorcerer King decided to join the Empire's war instead of initiating his own. But, if Riestais is to be destroyed, then what is to become of us? What of everything that the Sorcerer's Kingdom has invested so much into here? A brief flash of annoyance crossed Albedo's expression. It appeared that the demon's losses in Riestais were significant enough for her to become emotional over. The syndicate's leadership would no doubt be infuriated over them as well, though none would dare voice their discontent to their new masters. What can be salvaged, will be, Albedo said. As for your part, Countess Beaumont, there is an additional task to complete. What would you have me do, Your Excellency? The Royal Army desires a disruption of communications between the Azalisian marches and the kingdom's heartlands for the upcoming war, the demon smiled slightly. At the same time, they wish to experiment with the use of local collaborators, so you have been chosen to facilitate this. Albedo's imperious tone drove in the fact that the Countess was little more than a test subject. She was being regarded no differently than the samples of ore and other goods from across Riestais that the Sorceress Kingdom ordered the Eight Fingers to deliver to them. How shall I accomplish this, Your Excellency? Countess Beaumont asked. What methods you employ are for you to devise, Albedo answered. Personally, I recommend killing anyone who poses a threat to your success. Killing? The young noblewoman swallowed. But if I kill any messengers performing official duties, that would be considered rebellion. The demon's cold smile widened, her glowing amber eyes hardening with a vicious glint. Rebellion or oblivion, she said. That, too, is your choice to make. Does this mean I have even more work to do now? Liam remained unmoving as Countess Beaumont silently digested Lady Albedo's ultimatum. That ultimatum was also a chance, however, one that few in Riestais would be offered in the face of its imminent doom. I have heard from Liam that the Sorceress Kingdom still mostly operates under Riestais law, the Countess said. With that being the case, It would be far better to serve His Majesty the Sorcerer King than remain a vassal of House Bloomrush. Lady Albedo's imperious expression did not change, but Liam had worked for the Sorceress Kingdom long enough to know that it was a good response. Those who grovelled out of a sense of self-preservation were seen as little more than fodder. They were never more than tools that could be disposed of at a moment's notice. Those who responded with thought and purpose, on the other hand, were afforded at least some consideration. It was the exact opposite of what most assumed would be the case from a nation ruled by demons and the undead. To those who rose through the ranks of ruthless street gangs and criminal syndicates like the Eight Fingers, it was an incomprehensible dynamic. Liam eyed Olin out of the corner of his eye. The man remained standing at one end of the drawing room's central table, clutching a wooden casket in his hands. In all likelihood, he had probably thought to curry favor with some tribute, but Liam highly doubted that Lady Albedo would treat it in the same way as the heartfelt sacrifices offered to the Sorcerer King by demi-human tribes. "And what would you have us do, Lady Albedo?" Olin asked. Lady Albedo's gaze turned malevolent as she regarded the Eight Fingers executive. Olin took a step backwards, his mask of confidence peeling away to expose a mix of uncertainty and fear. "It is apparent that you still have not learned the meaning of obedience," the Prime Minister answered in an icy tone. Wait, what? The Eight Fingers were ordered to wind down their illegal operations in Riestize. "You have done the opposite. But I received permission from House Bloomrush." "Do you think me a fool, human?" Lady Albedo said as she continued to smile, "or do you perhaps consider me on the same level as the worms who seek any excuse to justify the pursuit of their petty vices?" "I would never. You have actively interdicted trade, and the parasitic practices of your subordinates suppresses the regional economy. Your actions are in such clear opposition to the intent of my directives that I cannot help but think that they were done on purpose." "No. I didn't mean it. I didn't know. Your weakness is expected, but your abject ignorance is a sin." Olin swallowed audibly, the blood draining from his face. Lady Albedo put Liam's reports away as she rose to her feet. "You are to cease all problematic operations immediately," Albedo told Olin. "After that, you will join the others in the capital. Do not tarry for long, His Majesty's Royal Army will not recognize you at a glance." So much for all of his big plans. Liam felt just a bit sorry for the guy. All of the success he had achieved in his life came from conducting criminal activities. He had probably done everything without thinking, assuming that the Sorceress Kingdom would interpret his achievements the same way an executive of the Eight Fingers would. He would have a rough time going forward, if he survived at all. After Olin rushed out of the manor, Liam used one of his message scrolls to call for a gate. Lady Shaltir seemed none too pleased about needing to taxi the Prime Minister around, but the portal appeared a moment later anyway. "Your Excellency," Lady Beaumont said. "How long do we have to achieve our objective?" "Considering the meager means of travel employed by your society," Lady Albedo replied, "it should take roughly 2 weeks before Bloomrush's envoy returns to Riestize's royal court with the verification that they seek. I will arrive then to officially receive their response." Not that their response would matter. The Sorceress Kingdom had already decided that there would be a war, so war it would be. "Hey! How long are you going to make me hold this thing open, you stupid gorilla?" Lady Albedo's lip twitched as Lady Shaltir's voice drifted through the gate. Liam and Lady Beaumont lowered their heads as the Prime Minister turned to leave, not raising them again until well after the portal vanished. "She wasn't who I expected her to be," the Countess said. "Lady Albedo? How so?" "She's far more beautiful than the rumors described," the young noblewoman said. "And the thing is that her appearance dominated the gossip surrounding her, as if it was her only noteworthy aspect. That's just how things are in Riestize, isn't it?" Liam said, "Men are recognized for their ability while women are admired for their beauty." "Which is exactly what I'm getting at," Lady Beaumont said as she went to collect her things from the table. "Women who show great capabilities are usually maligned, and Lady Albedo seems to be a very capable woman." Does that mean she's been concealing her true nature on purpose? You'd think that being the Prime Minister already tells everyone that she's a capable person. Even that part is strange, the Countess told him. Normally, there would be all sorts of criticisms and slander being propagated behind the back of a woman who managed to attain such a prominent office. Liam was born a subject of Riastai's, but he had next to no experience with its high society. In terms of life in a town, girls had their troubles, but things didn't seem anywhere near as oppressive as it was in the aristocratic establishment. His time in the Holy Kingdom mirrored that experience. Maybe they're just that scared of the Sorceress Kingdom, Liam said. What do you think of her? I like her, Lady Beaumont said. She obviously knows her business, and she's very austere. All things considered, it's a mystery why none of the lords with fiefs bordering the Sorceress Kingdom haven't long switched sides. Does that mean you're fine with what we're going to do? The Countess' hand stopped moving as she froze, half bent, over the table. I'm comfortable with the idea of siding with the Sorceress Kingdom, she said, but I haven't a clue as to how I will be able to play the role that I've been assigned. Not on such short notice, at any rate. Do you think you could just dispose of all of the messengers trying to leave the city? He was afraid of that. For all of the progress she had shown since he had met her, Countess Beaumont was just a regular noble. Her paths to power mostly lay in political maneuvering and economic development, both of which operated on timeframes of years, decades, and generations in Riastai's. He couldn't immediately come up with anything she could do with only 2 weeks to work with. That's not a plan that would work, Liam said. I can't guard every possible route a messenger might use at all times of the day, and it's not as if I'll magically know who to target. How about working with your allies? In all honesty, there wasn't much to hope for there either. In the week or two since the region's nobles had gathered in the city, 2 large factions had formed. Simply put, they were split into the haves and have-nots. They basically represented the same interests of the same 2 sides that had formed during the meeting that Countess Beaumont had hosted, except that the entire nobility had now joined the fray. The third faction, cobbled together by the 8 Fingers, quickly disintegrated as reality came to the fore, their members relegated to the backdrop as established aristocrats wrested control from what they saw as a group of inexperienced nobodies. Lady Beaumont still managed to maintain her closest ties, but her voice was next to non-existent in the new dynamic. She was seen as a countess in name alone, with nothing to offer that might affect the balance of power. And a very lopsided balance of power it was. On one side was a group whose primary goal was to simply survive to the next harvest. On the other was a coalition of lords who presided over the majority of the region's agricultural production. What bargaining power the former possessed had been whittled to near nothing by an endless tide of desperate refugees from the north that would do anything to feed themselves and their families. In the end, Lady Beaumont said, anything we try will require provisions that we don't have and can't afford. Well, I suppose there's always Count Renaud and his camp. We are supposed to be disrupting communications, Liam said sourly, not raiding villages for food. I know, the Countess sighed. But with things as they are, I can't think of any way to do this without ending up in open hostilities with the other faction. If that happens, Liam said, they are going to put pointy sticks into the hands of every refugee that flees into the Azalesian marches and point them in our direction. Actually, Lady Beaumont said, I'm not worried about that. You are not? The young noblewoman finished organizing her things and gestured for Liam to follow her out of the room. Claire stirred from her place in the hallway and fell into step behind them. The lowland lords might control most of the food stores, the Countess said, but that doesn't mean they have unlimited amounts of it. Historically, they've produced enough for themselves and the other territories in the region. While winter didn't come early here, the weather hasn't exactly been ideal this year. No one can afford open fighting because everyone will starve if it happens. That may be one reason why Lady Albedo wants to keep us out of the coming war. I wouldn't make Lady Albedo any nicer than she is, Liam said. Do you have something against her? Not really. I'm just saying that she's not doing it to be nice. You heard her just now, She's just salvaging what can be salvaged. That being said, they were no closer to figuring out how to salvage the situation than before. Stopping one or two messengers was a simple enough task so long as he knew who he was looking for, but disrupting communications for an extended period was another matter entirely. Too many things could go wrong when their resources were so limited. Liam accompanied Lady Beaumont as she went about her tasks for the day, which mostly consisted of organizing the shipments of food that she had secured from her closest allies. Wagons needed to be maintained, caravaneers paid, and a suitable escort set up under the handful of men who showed promise in leadership roles. It was a set of mundane, yet necessary tasks that took up a surprising amount of time. The Countess didn't bring up Albedo's instructions again until they sat down for dinner that same evening. "Our path forward might be clearer if we had more information," she said. "What kind of information?" Liam asked. "Oh, information about House Bloomrush's activities. They should have received instructions from the Marquis in addition to what the envoy came for. And then there's how everyone else will react to what they learn." It sounded like more complicated noble stuff. Nothing was ever straightforward with them. Even things as simple as choosing what to have for lunch seemed to be layered with meanings that Liam didn't care to think about. "I can take a look around if you want," Liam said. "But there isn't much time to think about what to do." "I understand that, but, as it is now, anything I try is essentially flailing around in the dark." Liam wolfed down his meal before excusing himself from the Countess' table. With a little bit of luck, he would be able to spy on some of the prominent houses while their members were gathered for dinner. As he left the manor and made his way out of the grounds, he crossed paths with Reed. The ranger looked a bit beaten under the shadow of his mantle, though his weariness didn't show in his long stride. "That was quick," Liam said. "It's just me," Reed replied. "The caravan's still getting over the pass." "Did you run into trouble?" "No, nothing like that. Figured I'd report in so they're ready for the handoff when our wagons arrive." Reed and his men had spent the last 2 weeks escorting a caravan carrying food to Beaumont County, and then returning with the fuel promised in exchange. The route didn't go through Bloomrusher, but the lords of the respective destination territories were all present in the city. "How are things out in the countryside?" Liam asked. "Word about the famine's gotten out along the highway," Reed answered. "People are stocking up what they can and it's driving the prices for everything up." "Everything?" Liam frowned. "Not just food?" "Well, you know how those merchants are," the ranger spat onto the lawn beside the lane. "They play the rumors that come with the rumors, and all the little worries that the people end up with. Wouldn't be surprised if they seeded most of those worries in the first place. I hope no one's been trying to make some coin for themselves by selling bits of your cargo." "Not that I've noticed," Reed replied. "Our cargo matched the manifest every step of the way. I admit I'm kinda surprised at that." "It's a good thing, at least," Liam said. "Do you know if it's the same with the other groups?" "Couldn't tell ya. Haven't come across 'em much since they started reporting directly to Lady Beaumont. Oh, speaking of other groups, we got more and more guys looking to join up. Because they want to help, or because they want to get paid? Why not both? I guess you'll have to talk to Lady Beaumont about that," Liam said. Liam pondered the potential for extra manpower as he continued on his way. Knowing the Countess, she would see them as a way to improve order and security in her fief. The problem was that House Beaumont's revenues weren't high enough to keep so many men on retainer. Even if they were, House Beaumont didn't have the means to ensure their quality. As he had learned, cultivating competent regiments of professional armsmen was a process that took generations. Most of Re-Esti's had lost that capability due to the imprudence of their aristocrats. The toll of a temple bell drifted over the wall of the upper city. Liam picked up his steps. The first destination he would visit would be the most obvious one, which was Bloomrush Castle. He had previously walked around its premises to familiarize himself with the place, but hadn't had any reason to linger for long until now. The few household servants he came across paid him little mind as they rushed to finish their evening errands, which didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. Liam concealed himself in the shadows of a long hedge as he drew close to the castle, keeping an ear open to the chatter of the sentries as he mentally marked their positions. "Hey, what's the mess putting out tonight?" "Fish stew and rye bread. And water." "Fuck. Cheap asses could at least pretend to measure up to the pleasure quarter. If you like it there so much, then why not head there instead? I would if they hadn't cleaned me out last night. I'll win it all back next week, though." Liam frowned to himself as he made his way along the castle wall, listening in on 3 other, similarly bland, conversations. The relaxed attitude of the Bloomrush armsmen suggested that either they had received no orders that would have them break from their usual routines. He would have to find one of the higher-ups if he wanted to learn anything noteworthy. He scaled a section of the wall with braziers that had fallen behind on refueling, swiftly dropping down the opposite side into the castle yard. Unlike the relative quiet on the outside, the yard was alive with activity due to Lord Reginald's move to control Bloomrush's industry. A large portion of the city's workshops had their contents relocated to create dozens of workstations where artisans from the city toiled under the watchful eye of House Bloomrush. With so many people moving about, it was a simple matter to blend in and take a closer look at what was going on. As it had throughout the winter, Castle Bloomrush churned out a steady flow of manufactured goods required for the city's reconstruction. Everything from nails and timber beams to tools and furniture could be spotted in various stages of completion or in the covered stockpiles awaiting delivery to the lower city. It wasn't until he almost reached the castle's keep that he found the first clues as to how House Bloomrush was reacting to news of the war. A column of several men in carpenter's garb was roughly escorted to an open spot near the entrance of the castle armory, where a rotund official in Bloomrush colours awaited them with crossed arms. "You have a new task," the official said as the men formed a row in front of his platform. "These timbers are to be fashioned into serviceable poles." "Poles?" One of the carpenters wrinkled his nose as he looked up at the official. "Isn't it too early to get started on spring tools?" "They are for spears, you cretin. I expect this lot to be ready by the morning." The official's shout didn't go unnoticed by the artisans working nearby. They kept their heads down, however, even as more of their fellows were picked out by armsmen and brought to the armory. Liam watched as blacksmiths were ordered to begin fashioning spearheads and kettle hats, tailors were put to work producing gambesons, and an array of other artisans were organized to ready the various sundries and provisions essential to facilitating soldiers on campaign. It won't take long for the rest of the city to find out about this. Once the current shift ended, word would spread like wildfire throughout the common districts and beyond. To Liam, the entire exercise of preparing a levy to go to war against the Sorcerer's Kingdom felt futile. To the people of Riestize, however, there wasn't much of a choice. Satisfied with what he had gleaned from the castle yard, Liam proceeded to sneak over the nearby wall to scale the keep on its river-facing side. With House Bloomrush being as extravagant and self-indulgent as rumored, he had no shortage of handholds to take advantage of as he made his way to the topmost balcony of the embellished structure. No guards were posted, not that they would expect anyone to crawl up the side of the castle, and he settled himself comfortably out of sight. A few meters away from the balcony was a broad desk, where Lord Reginald was seated facing the interior of a spacious office. As Liam had hoped, he caught the lordling partaking of his evening meal. Unlike most lords, however, he wasn't using the time to discuss anything with anyone. Instead, he reclined leisurely as he enjoyed the melodic strains from an unseen harpist. Maybe I should have stayed down below, considering the dire situation Riestize found itself in. Marquis Bloomrush had possibly drawn up direct orders to various key subordinates rather than leaving his son to figure things out. Liam sighed as he prepared to climb back down, but then a voice from the office brought him back to the balcony entrance. "Lord Reginald, my apologies for interrupting your meal, but Lord Forbin is demanding to see you." "Forbin?" Lord Reginald replied. "What does he want?" "He wishes to speak about the message you just sent him." It's not my message, Lord Reginald said as he raised the silver cutlery he was wielding in each hand. They are orders from my Lord Father. Be that as it may, my lord. The sound of the harp abruptly halted as Lord Reginald's utensils clattered onto his plate. Fine, he said. Take all this away. This onerous business spoils the appetite. 4 maids appeared to prepare the office for Lord Reginald's meeting with Lord Forbin. Liam had to leap over the side of the balcony to avoid the notice of a broom-wielding maid who approached with terrifying rapidity. He held his breath as a cloud of dust and debris was swept over the edge to be picked up by the evening wind. 5 minutes later, the maids disappeared as swiftly as they had appeared, replaced by a middle-aged man in colourful, finely tailored garb that gave off a militant air. Good evening, Count Forbin, Lord Reginald said as he rose in greeting. It distresses me to hear that you do not wish to comply with the Marquis' orders. Compliance has nothing to do with it, Lord Reginald, the Count replied tersely. These orders are practically impossible to carry out. Yet you are obliged to do so at your liege's call, Lord Reginald said. Given that we used to do this every year, I find it hard to believe that you cannot do it after 2. We managed then because there was ample forewarning, Count Forbin said. Mustering the levy and preparing the provisions required to field them cannot be done on such short notice. Liam wondered what sort of schedule had been outlined in the Marquis' missive. He already knew that the Sorceress Kingdom would attack long before Re-Estize would have a chance to fully assemble its forces, but, as far as Re-Estize was concerned, they were still conducting diplomacy. Lord Reginald, a middle-aged butler said from the entrance of the office, Lord Laval wishes to speak with you. Lord Reginald and Lord Forbin shared a look. See him in, Lord Reginald released a long-suffering sigh. It's probably about the same thing anyway. Moments later, a moustached noble sporting the same style of militant fashion as Count Forbin strode into the room. Count Laval, Lord Reginald nodded. Not the first to arrive, I see, Count Laval said. Are you implying that there are more to come? Lord Reginald said sourly. Who knows? Lord Laval replied with the ghost of a smile. In all seriousness, Lord Reginald, I would not be surprised. These orders from the Marquis are utterly unreasonable. Only a fool would follow them blindly. Unlike Countess Beaumont and several of the other young aristocrats he had observed, the 2 men standing before Lord Reginald showed little in the way of deference to the Marquis' son. Lord Reginald clearly recognized that, and it was a testament to their standing that he couldn't resort to his usual tactics to cow them. Lord Laval is correct, a third noble said as he entered the office. A full levy at this time would see our fields half sown and the winter's damage unrepaired. This is not exactly a wise course of action coming off the back of last autumn's disastrous harvest. My Lord Father did not issue these orders for his personal amusement, Count Montfort, Lord Reginald said. They are necessary for the defence of the realm. Necessary, yet impossible, Count Montfort said. Scutage is the only option. Scutage? Lord Reginald said, and what do you propose we do with that? There seems to be no shortage of mercenaries around Rebloom Rusher these days. Lord Reginald scoffed. I assure you, my lord, no amount of gold will be able to secure mercenaries for the coming conflict. The 3 counts frowned in unison. What do you mean by that? Lord Laval asked. Surely they will be more than happy to accept payment to crush all of the peasant revolts this famine is bound to incite. In response, Lord Reginald snatched up a half-furled roll of parchment and tossed it on the desk in front of him. The 3 men paled as they read what was written upon it. Any other questions? Lord Reginald asked. No, Lord Reginald, Count Forbin answered. The situation is clear to us now. Good. I have no idea when this war will start, but I highly doubt that our adversary will wage it at our convenience. The nobles bowed slightly before turning to leave the room. Liam listened to several more meetings, all of which followed a similar pattern of discussion, before climbing back down the keep and leaving the castle. What do we do now? As if things weren't complicated enough, An army would be gathering from all over the Azalisian marches. While it wouldn't be composed of professional fighting men, their numbers would be more than sufficient to make the open use of force to stop communications impossible. Not that he had the ability to command House Beaumont's forces against them in the first place. Command? On a whim, he used one of his message scrolls. "Hey Raoul, you still around? I'm still up in these mountains, if that's what you mean. I want your opinion on this new job we got from Lady Albedo. Can you come to the city? Can't you just tell me over the message spell? It'll run out before I can do that." "All right. It'll take a couple of hours for me to get there, though. Where do I meet you?" "The higher-ups have maps of Bloomrussia from my reports. I'll be at the Beaumont Manor in the upper city." When Liam returned to the manor, Countess Beaumont rushed down the stairs to meet him at the entrance. To Liam's surprise, Baroness Ileron came down after her. "Liam, this is terrible," she said. "Marquis Bloomrush has ordered all of his vassals to raise their levies." "I heard," Liam replied. "How long ago did you receive the order?" "Just after you left," Lady Beaumont said. "Ileron here came to consult with me on the matter. They want our men camped outside the city by the end of the month, which is simply impossible." "You are not the only one saying that," Liam said. "But the nobles I listened in on are going to try anyway." "How does that affect, you know?" "About that," Liam said, "I called Raoul over. He might have some ideas." "Raoul? Oh, I guess you've never met him. He's the guy who helped Reed's gang thin out the wildlife near your territory. At any rate, he should be here before midnight." "In that case," the Countess said, "I should offer some hospitality. What is his station?" "He's just a guy like me," Liam said. "A couple of years older, I guess." 2 hours later, one of Reed's men brought Raoul to the entrance of the manor. Raoul shook the rain from his mantle before stepping inside. "Hey," Liam said. "Hey," said Raoul. "So, what did you want to talk about?" "Come upstairs," Liam said. "Lady Beaumont had some dinner made for you." The Countess awaited their arrival in the drawing room of her Solar, where Claire served dinner to their late-night guest. Raoul's gaze went between Lady Beaumont, Claire, and Liam as the buxom maid returned to stand near Liam. "What?" Liam said. "Nothing," Raoul replied. "Thanks for the meal, by the way." "A pleasure, Mr. Raoul," Lady Beaumont smiled. "Liam mentioned that you might be able to help us out in some way." "I haven't even heard what this is all about yet," Raoul said with a pointed look at Liam. As Raoul ate his meal, Liam described their situation, including the admittedly generic instructions that Lady Albedo had left with them. Raoul didn't ask any questions as he listened, but he did ask for a map of the march once he finished eating. All they could provide was a trade map that only showed the area's settlements and their connecting routes. Ro glanced over the thing before he looked back up at Liam. "So you have to stop anyone from reaching the capital?" Raoul asked. "We are supposed to disrupt communications to the kingdom's heartlands," Liam answered. "Same thing, pretty much. I can do it." Liam and Countess Beaumont blinked blankly at Raoul's words. "You can?" Liam asked. "Yeah," Raoul smirked. "It'll be easy."